Roman 1, determine Roman 1, the time Lamu bus arrived in Nairobi. The time Lamu bus arrived, the time Lamu bus arrived in Nairobi. So we'll do Roman 1 and then we shall write and do Roman 2. So my dear student, Coast bus left Nairobi. So there is Nairobi and there is Mombasa. There is Nairobi and Mombasa. Coast bus left Nairobi at 8:00 a.m. and traveled towards Mombasa at an average speed of 80 kilometers per hour. Lamu bus left Mombasa. Lamu bus left Mombasa at an average speed towards Nairobi at an average speed of 120 kilometers per hour. At what time did Lamu bus left Mombasa towards Nairobi at an average speed of 120 kilometers per hour? There is a statement here. At 8:30. I want you to end this statement here. At 8:30 a.m. At 8:30 a.m., Lamu bus left Mombasa towards Nairobi at an average speed of 100. It was at 8:30 a.m. at an average speed of 120 kilometers per hour. And the distance between Nairobi and Mombasa is 400 kilometers. Question Roman 1 is asking the time the Lamu bus arrived in Nairobi. We know this triangle that DST. DST means time taken is equals to distance over speed. So the question is the time Lamu bus arrived in Nairobi. Lamu bus started the journey in Mombasa at 8:30 a.m. and it moved at an average speed of 120 kilometers per hour. And the distance between Mombasa and Nairobi is 400 kilometers. So the time taken by the Lamu bus is equals to the distance between Mombasa and Nairobi, which is 400 kilometers, divided by the average speed of the Lamu bus, which is 120 kilometers per hour. So I know you have your calculators there. You can simplify. Let me use mine. So 400 kilometers divided by 120, it gives us 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours, and this is 3 hours 20 minutes. 3 hours 20 minutes. So since the Lamu bus left at 8:30 a.m. and it took 3 hours 20 minutes to arrive to Nairobi, then you add and get 30 plus 20, 50, 8 plus 3, 8, 9, 10, 11. Therefore, the Lamu bus arrived in Nairobi at 11:50 a.m. At 11:50 a.m. Question Roman 2. I believe that question Roman 1 is well understood. Question Roman 2. The time the two buses met. The time the two buses met. The time the two buses met linear motion, the time the two buses, this is the most important, it has 4 marks, the time the two buses met. For us to get the time the two buses met, we have Nairobi, Mombasa. We have the coastal bus. Coastal bus left at 8:00 a.m. at an average speed of 80 kilometers per hour. The Lamu bus left at 8:30 a.m. 120 kilometers per hour. So the first step, my dear student, the first step for us to get the time the two buses met is we get the time difference, departure time difference. Departure time difference will be 8:30 a.m. minus 8 a.m. because one bus left at 8 a.m., the other one 8:30 a.m. That is 30 minutes, which is equivalent to half an hour. The first step is you get the departure time difference, which is half an hour. After getting the departure time difference, the distance between Nairobi and Mombasa is 400 kilometers. So the coast bus started the journey at 8 a.m. and it traveled for 30 minutes. It traveled for 30 minutes before the Lamu bus began the journey, because the Lamu bus began the journey at 8:30. So we want to first of all know the distance covered by the coast bus by 8:30. Distance covered by coast bus by 8:30 a.m. 8:30 a.m. is the time the Lamu bus left. So what distance had the coastal bus covered at 8:30 a.m.? This is what you'll do. You'll take the speed of the coastal bus, 80 kilometers per hour, multiply by the departure time difference, half an hour, and you'll get 40 kilometers. So 40 kilometers back to our table here is the distance covered by the coastal bus from Nairobi by 8:30 a.m. when the Lamu bus was beginning the journey. So what is the distance between the two vehicles? If the total distance from Nairobi to Mombasa is 400 kilometers and the coast bus has already covered 40 kilometers by 8:30, what is the difference in distance, or what is the distance between them? Distance between them will be, the two vehicles will be the total distance minus the distance covered by the coastal bus by 8:30 a.m. and you'll get 360 kilometers. That is the distance between the two vehicles. Next step, we already have the distance between the two vehicles by 8:30 a.m. The next step is get the relative speed. Get the relative speed. The relative speed we said for the vehicles moving in the opposite direction. To get the relative speed, we are going to add their speeds. So we'll take 80 kilometers per hour plus 120 kilometers per hour, and the relative speed is 200 kilometers per hour. Time taken to meet. Time taken to meet. We said time taken to meet is the distance between the two vehicles by the time the vehicle that left late left divided by the relative speed. So it is 360 kilometers divided by the 200 kilometers per hour. Using your calculators back at home, I'm also using mine. 360 kilometers divided by 200 kilometers. That will give us 1.8 hours, which is 1 hour 48 minutes. 1.8 hours, which is 1 hour 48 minutes. So for us to get the time they met, you'll take the time of the vehicle that left late, that is 8:30 a.m. You earned the time taken for the vehicles to meet, which is 1 hour 48 minutes. 1 hour 48 minutes. So you'll get 30 plus 48, that is 78. 18 carry 1 hour, 8, 9, 10. So the two vehicles met at 10:18 a.m. Therefore, the two vehicles met at 10:18 a.m. That was Roman 2 of the question. The time the two buses met is 10:18 a.m. First of all, get the distance covered by the vehicle that began the journey early when the other one was starting the journey. That one is gotten by the departure time difference multiplied by the speed of that vehicle. Then, since the total distance is 400 kilometers, subtract the 40 kilometers that this vehicle had covered when the other vehicle was beginning the journey for you to get the distance between the two vehicles. After getting the distance between the two vehicles, calculate the relative speed. Because they are moving in opposite direction, you will add their speeds to get the relative speed, and that is 200 kilometers per hour. To get the time taken to meet, take the distance between the two vehicles divided by the relative speed. You get 1 hour 48 minutes. Take the time of the vehicle that left late, 8:30 a.m., and the time taken to meet. You'll get the time the two vehicles met. Question Roman 3. The distance from Nairobi to the point where the buses met. Distance from Nairobi, believe you have copied this. Distance from Nairobi to the point. Distance from Nairobi, Roman 3, we are determining. Distance from Nairobi to the point, the two buses met. Distance from Nairobi to the point the two buses met. Now, my question is, before we started calculating the time taken to meet, the coastal bus, because that is the bus that is moving from Nairobi, had already covered 40 kilometers. By 8:30 a.m., when the Lamu bus was leaving, the coast bus had already covered 40 kilometers from Nairobi. Then after that, it traveled with its speed of 80 kilometers per hour and took 1.8 hours to meet with the Lamu bus. Remember, we are asked the distance from Nairobi to the point the two buses met. The coast bus, which is the bus moving from Nairobi, had already covered 40 kilometers by 8:30 a.m. Then after covering the 40 kilometers, Lamu bus began the journey, and both of them continued with their original speeds. So the coast bus continued with the speed of 80 kilometers per hour, and it took 1.8 hours to meet with the Lamu bus. So for us to know the distance from Nairobi, we'll take the 40 kilometers it had already covered plus its speed times the time taken to meet. 80 times 1.8. Calculate with your calculator. 80 times 1.8. 144 kilometers. Therefore, my dear student, the distance from Nairobi to the point where the two buses met is 184 kilometers. Is 184 kilometers. Before we move to Roman 4, which is the last question, I want us to ask ourselves, what if we were asked? The last question is how far the coast bus is from Mombasa when the Lamu bus arrives in Nairobi. Before we go to that question, what if, because in the exam you can be asked, the distance from Mombasa to the meeting point, If we were asked the distance from Mombasa to the meeting point, we will take the speed of the vehicle that is moving from Mombasa. That is the Lamu bus, 120 kilometers per hour, multiply by the time taken to meet, 1.8 hours. And the distance from Mombasa to the meeting point will be 120 multiplied by 1.8, which is 216 kilometers. Now, my dear student, the last part of our question is how far coast bus is. I believe that you've already copied this. This is a very interesting topic if you understand it, because these are real life things. How far coast bus is from Mombasa? How far coast bus is from Mombasa when Lamu bus arrives in Nairobi? When Lamu bus arrived. How far coast bus is from Mombasa when Lamu bus arrives in Nairobi? My dear student, my question is, at what time did the Lamu bus arrive in Nairobi? That was question Roman 1. Question Roman 1 was the time it arrived in Nairobi. And we calculated and saw that the time taken for the Lamu bus, time taken for Lamu bus to arrive in Nairobi was 3 hours. 3 hours, 3.5 hours. We had calculated in Roman 1. That was the time taken by the Lamu bus to arrive in Nairobi. And the question is, how far coast bus is from Mombasa when Lamu bus arrives in Nairobi? What is the speed of the coast bus? The speed of the coast bus is 80 kilometers per hour. The time taken for the Lamu bus to arrive in Nairobi is 3.5 hours. So the distance from Nairobi, the coast bus is coming from Nairobi. Distance from Nairobi by this time is 3.5 hours multiplied, or we start with the speed. Speed multiplied by time. So we'll take 80 kilometers times 3.5 hours. 80 times 3.5 hours. It gives us 266.67 kilometers. This is distance from Nairobi, but tunaulizwa how far Coast Bus is from Mombasa. So distance from Mombasa will be the total distance minus distance from Nairobi. And you will get 400. And remember that still there is a 40 kilometers that this Coast Bus had covered by 8:30. Don't forget that. There is a 40 kilometers it had covered. Never forget to add that. So 400 minus 266.67 plus 40. 400 minus 306.67. Someone is asking, why are we adding these 40 kilometers? Remember, Coast Bus had already covered 40 kilometers before the Lamu bus began the journey. That's why we must add 40 kilometers to the distance from Nairobi. That's why we must add 40 kilometers to the distance from Nairobi. So we'll take the distance from Mombasa as 400 kilometers minus 306.67 kilometers. And that will give us 93.33 kilometers. That is the distance, how far Coast Bus is from Mombasa when Lamu bus arrives in Nairobi, and that's how we get the answer. Note the question. How far Coast Bus is from Mombasa when Lamu bus arrives in Nairobi? In Roman 1, Lamu bus arrives in Nairobi after 3.5 hours. After 3.5 hours. And we need to know how far the Coast Bus had traveled in 3.5 hours. So the speed of the Coast Bus is 80 kilometers per hour, multiplied by 3.5 hours to get the distance from Nairobi. Remember, this is the distance from Nairobi from 8:30 a.m. But from 8 to 8:30, the Coast Bus had already covered 40 kilometers. So we must add that 40 kilometers. Then that is the distance from Nairobi. But the question is asking distance from Mombasa. Take the total distance minus the distance from Nairobi. You can continue sending your questions. I'll read them, or even your comments as we conclude. Thank you. Yeah, I can see a comment here. Hello, Teacher Kelvin. Ume-explain vizuri sana. Where do you teach? As I began, I said I teach in Lakewood Senior Girls. Thank you for that comment. Another comment here. Hello, Teacher Kelvin. Ni Faith from Joro Nakuru. Unafundisha vizuri sana. Good job. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your comments, all of you. I believe that you have understood each and every concept that I have taught. And I believe that at the end of it all, when you work hard in mathematics, when you do your best in mathematics and develop a positive attitude towards mathematics, you are going to achieve the best. Before I conclude, I want to tell you one thing. Always take mathematics as your booster subject. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my dear students. Can see there are no other questions. Thank you for those who have commented. Thank you for those who have asked questions. Thank you for those who have learned with us together. Thank you for the lesson of linear motion. Thank you very much. May God bless you abundantly, and may you have a blessed day. My name is Teacher Kelvin Bundi Nyambura. But before I leave, I want to tell you about my book that I have written, Boosting Mathematics Performance. Boosting Mathematics Performance KCSE Mathematics Revision Book is a book written by I. I've written the book. divided into 2 papers, paper 1 and paper 2, 2 sections for each paper, section 1 and section 2. It's an interesting book with the KCSE related questions. Use this book in revision, and I believe that your mathematics life will never be the same again. To get this book, you can contact me through 0705 845 747. Thank you. My name is Teacher Kelvin for the Nyambura from Lakewood Senior Girls School. Thank you. God bless you.